All right, so attach. First part, so attach has two parts, cone up has two parts, and center down, we're doing two things at the same time. So I like to break these all down so that you get the understanding of what each one is doing. So for the first part of attach, it's slamming it onto the wheel and then trying to get the bottom of the clay stuck on the wheel. So this is the first part. Turn that one on. Now the second part of attach is, this is not fully attached. We want to use water to suction it onto the wheel. So you're gonna wet your hands. We're gonna get our wheel speed, which is gonna be about here. Good. And we're going to use our hands to suction it. So when we're grabbing it, we're grabbing, like letting the clay touch the palm of our hand to hold, and we're using our right pinky on the bottom of the wheel. So it's going to be directly down on the wheel under the clay, squeezing. We do this for 3 seconds and then we let go, whether it's attached or not. So it's going to be hold, squeeze, let go. If it's not attached, then you just repeat. So you're looking for gaps. And if you still have gaps, you're gonna keep going. So hold, squeeze, let go. And then you're looking to see if you've got any gaps.
What do you think? I don't see any gaps.
See that dark spot that's right there that keeps popping up? Yeah. Good. All right. So yeah, you want to see no dark spots. A dark spot, if you stop the wheel, it's a place where there's air or space underneath the clay. So you just want to make sure the clay is completely attached. Once it is, we're done with attached. We move on to cone and up. So that I like to split into 2 parts, where we do cone first. So to do cone, you're crossing your thumbs over each other, so one is on top of the other and your index fingers are together. You're creating like a triangle, and you're coming on top of the clay and pushing the clay down until it looks like a cone shape. And then you're getting the bottom of the clay connected to the wheel. So it's not moving your hands down, it's holding your hands in the shape of a cone and using the bottom part of your hand to squeeze the bottom part of that clay. Because the problem is that if you do that, you're gonna get that skinny spiral and then that clay is gonna rip off. So you're keeping the top of the clay, top of your fingers at the top of the clay, and putting the bottom part of your hand down here to the bottom of the clay, and then squeezing in until we've got a cone shape. Now the reason why we want a cone shape is because we want that top to be skinnier than the bottom for the next part that we're gonna do up. So when this top is skinnier, the job now is to match the top with the bottom, match the bottom with the top. So we're gonna take our hands to the side of the clay and we're gonna squeeze in to start getting the bottom of the clay skinnier. And we're gonna keep doing this until we've got a tall tower. So use this bone in your hand at the side of the clay. Move forward. You gotta be in the middle here. So not behind the clay, but you wanna be at the side of the clay. And you're pushing in on both sides. So both hands pushing in. Nope, you're still this part, side of the clay. So this bone is what squeezes the clay. So it has to be here, right there, and then you're pushing in and in. There you go. And we're trying to get that to be one even tower. Now the reason why we do this step is because we don't wedge here, but you either have to wedge or you have to cone to soften the clay. So if you don't soften the clay, it's going to be hard to work with. Nope, don't move on the clay, like lock your hands in place, and then you want to squeeze in. So if you move on the clay is going to move. You want to hold yourself still so that the clay stays still. Good. So once we've got that small tower, we know that we've squeezed most of that clay. So now we're going to center down. So center is always going to be your left palm. Down is going to be your right fist, and it's the fleshy part of your fist. So you want to avoid this bone and you want to avoid that bone. So when you're on top of the clay, it's only that fleshy part that touches it. And any time that your bone starts to get down into it, you need to tilt your hand so that you're only using that fleshy part. Center is your left palm pushing the clay in a 2 o'clock direction. So the clay is going to lean in that direction. And then down is pushing the clay down to the height that we need it to be. So center, and then fist on top, down. So as I'm pushing the clay centered, I'm also pushing it down. No, but hold on. So my hand's at the top of the clay, not at the bottom of the clay. So, and then push it center, and you need to make this a fist. There you go, and push down. There you go. Come off when the clay is dry. Wet your hands and keep going. So this is determined on what you're trying to make. So the question is, do you want something short and wide, or do you want something tall and skinny? Because then that's what you're aiming for. But I want to say, like, when you're first starting out, the universal goal is to be able to make something that looks almost like the size and shape of a hockey puck. But then as you start to say, no, I want it to be skinnier and I want it to be taller, you can make it skinny and taller. No, I want it to be shorter and I want it to be wider, you can make it shorter and wider. But the almost starting goal is hockey puck size. All right, so the goal here is to have straight wall on the side. So you want to make sure that you're using the back part of your palm and you're avoiding your finger getting in there. And then you also want to make sure that you're centered. So at this point, the clay shouldn't be spinning all over the place. It should be directly in the middle of the wheel. And then you're coming off slow to keep it fine. We're going to take the thumb tips and put them together in the top center of our clay. We're going to push straight down. So you don't want to push diagonal forward. It's straight down. Like, think of a well. You're just opening up a well in the top center of your piece. When the clay is getting dry, you're coming out, wetting your thumbs, and going back in. Taking your time and slowly opening that clay. If you open it with dry hands, it is going to become uncentered. So you want to make sure that your thumbs are always wet when you go in. You don't want to use your fingers to hold the clay, otherwise you can also throw it off. So you rest them on the wheel. And you're going down till we're close to the bottom. Because you opened the width too. So you only always want to open the depth. When you're doing your depth, so that you can make sure that you open your width evenly.
Okay.
The problem is if you rip it open evenly and then one side has too much, you can't fix that later. So we're going to stop our wheel and check our depth. I'm going to grab the pin tool. I'm going to hold it upside down, push it into the piece till it goes all the way down to the wheel. Slide your finger till it goes down to where the clay is, and then bring it up. There we go, not bad. All right, and then we're going to spin the wheel again and close up that pinhole. So as the wheel spins, we're gonna let our finger hold it over that pinhole and let it close. You're not trying to push down anymore, but you are trying to add a little bit of pressure so that that hole closes up. So for your width, you're coming in with your thumbs knuckle to knuckle. And if you've done your depth where it's only the size of your thumbs, then only your thumbs fit in there now. So if I need to pull this width out and I have only my thumbs in there and I start to slowly pull it out, I can evenly split that clay. And then I'm stopping anytime that the clay gets dry. I can feel an even pull. And the goal is to get about 1 inch to 1.5 inches between the thumbs in width. I'm gonna say about there. And then once we have the width open, we want to compress the bottom of our clay because all of that clay is uneven now, and we want to make sure we compress it to the point that it's tight and all of that clay can't crack. So you're taking the sponge, folding it over on itself, starting in the middle of the clay. Now that we've got the bottom compressed, we're gonna pull the height. Now this is also where it depends on what you're making, because if you pull all of the height and make it skinny, it's gonna be tall, and then you can shape it. But can you go out wide? No. So if you wanna go out wide, you'd pull half the height and then stretch the clay out. So it's kind of depending on what you're going for. So if you're going for a bowl, you're pulling half the height and then stretching that clay out, as opposed to pulling all of the height and then trying to open that clay. So we're gonna have our left hand tucked inside the piece, and you're using one finger, the side of your finger, at the side of the piece. But since holding one finger in there can be hard sometimes, you can put your whole hand in, but you're just focusing on that one hand touching the wall. Your right hand, thumb on one side and fingers on the other side. We're using our pointer and our middle with the thumb. So these 3 fingers are pushing the clay and lifting the clay up with a sponge right in front of it. So left hand is not pushing. Left hand is inside and it's just coming up straight. Right hand on the outside is starting from the very bottom of the clay, is pushing the clay in and slowly lifting the clay up. When you're doing this, I normally tell my students you want to count 10 seconds from the bottom of the clay to the top of the clay to make sure that you're going slow, because this, if you go too fast, you're going to make the clay uneven. So you want to make sure that you start at the bottom, you create a little bit of pressure, and you raise that pressure up the piece nice and slow. Don't push with the inside hand and come all the way up to the top You're going too fast. So see how you just finished and I'm still on my piece? You're going too fast because I just finished my pull. So you want to count that 10 seconds. So try it again, start at the bottom and count 10 seconds. Even if you count 10 seconds fast, there's no way that you'd be able to count it that fast. So you want to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Nice and slow. And then again, depending on the shape that you're trying to go for is where you decide where you're going to stop pulling that height, because the skinnier you make it, it cannot be wide at that point.
I'm happy with my shape.
Well, we don't have a shape yet. This is not the shape. This is just evening out the clay. Okay.
That's good. I think it's gonna be way too skinny if I do more.
Yeah. So we'll leave it at that height so that way we can shape it out. What's in there is even. Alright. And then once we have that clay even, then we can shape. So when you're working on shape, we slow the wheel down a lot slower and we focus on pulling the clay to the shape that we want. So a couple different ways to pull. I can pull at an angle by having an inside hand and outside hand and pulling it out on an angle. Again, I want to move slow, and when I'm coming off, I want to move slow so that the clay doesn't boomerang. The other thing that we can do is make the clay round. That's taking the tip of your finger on the inside, nothing on the outside, and you're pushing that clay until you see a curve on the outside. Don't look on the inside because you'll never see the same type of curve. And then you're curving that piece out.
I just want to make it straight at the bottom, but the even width.
So then you're going to, then we're going to use a tool. And what this tool does is I can hold it to the side of the piece and then use my finger on the inside and push it up against it. And it makes the whole piece straight. You can do a lot of things with your hands. It's just what you want to do. And then it's using your hands in the way that it works. So anything that's coming out is your hand inside working the clay that way. Anything that's going in is your hand working it that way. So it's really just like, let's say that I wanted this to have a curve here at the bottom. I'm using two hands on the outside and one hand on the inside to create that shape. And then let's say that above that, I want this to come in. I'm gonna use my hands to push that clay in. And then let's say that at the top, I want it to change. Again, I'm gonna use my hands to change that shape. So all of that's just your hands. It's either inside, outside, curve, straight, but you have to know, I mean, you can play around, but here's the thing. I just did all of that. If I go, I don't want any of this. I want it to go back to how it was. It's gonna be weak because I just stretched it and now I'm saying change.
Compress and
So the main thing is any shape that you give it,
Mhm.
that's the shape it has, and you stop.
Mhm.
Because once you start to change it, it's bending, it's bending, it's bending, this whole thing will rip.
Mhm.
So yeah, I normally tell people like you want to know what it is that you want to do, and then you want to go for that.
Mhm.
You don't want to try to like change the shape too many times, because if you do, eventually it'll just give up. Yeah. So then once we have our piece, then we can take it off the wheel and we're done.
Wheel or by hand?
So it can be done on the wheel.